Ever wonder what makes really creative people tick? Where do their ideas come from? What keeps them energized? What kinds of things get in their way? Is their life really as much fun as it looks from the outside? Hello, I'm your host, Lily Pierpont, and this is ArtStorming, a podcast about how new ideas come to life and become paintings, sculptures, plays, or poems, performances, or collections. Each episode, I'll chat with a guest from the arts community and explore how the most creative among us stare down a blank canvas or reach into the void and create something new. Today's ArtStorming session will explore the intersection of dance, music, and spirituality, how it gets experienced, as well as how it gets communicated. I doubt there's anyone listening who hasn't been deeply moved by an encounter with the arts. Something more than mere entertainment. How that happens may be a bit of a mystery, but the arts have that potential to transport us to a deeper part of ourselves, to connect us to our physical bodies, our communities, and even spirit with a capital S, however one defines that. Today's guest, Sarah Nickerson, has turned her passion for the arts, music, and dance into a mission to promote meaningful movement, courageous conversations, and radical compassion. That's a big mission. And yet, as someone who's danced with her almost daily for 5 years, I can vouch that she delivers on that mission every time we gather to move to music. All right, I'm here with Sarah Nickerson, and on my way over here, I realized that one of the reasons might be really exciting and interesting is because I've known Sarah for about 5 years now, but we've spent very little time talking. All of our communication happens on the dance floor, and Sarah has been leading me in my dance practice for the better part of 5 years. And where she's sitting here on the sofa next to her beautiful... what is it called?
Lagotto Romagnolo.
Okay, so we'll let her say that. And it's a dog breed that I absolutely love, but it occurred to me that when you dance together and have all that silent communication, it's not unlike having a pet who you know for years and years and years, but then you realize one day that they've never said a word.
Yeah.
Right? And so we have this communication, and I feel like I know so many things, so much about you just through our communion together. Mm-hmm. But I really don't know that much about you because we haven't sat down and actually had a conversation.
Yes.
So this is going to be our moment.
Wonderful.
We're going to do what we do on the floor, but with words.
With words. Okay. I'm in.
And I've met members of Sarah's family on the dance floor. Mm-hmm. I've met Sarah's husband on the dance floor. I'm now meeting Sarah's lovely dog, not on the dance floor. But it's this kind of communication through the arts is what we're going to kind of explore today. And one of the reasons I was really interested to talk to you is because not only are you a dancer, you're a singer with Desert Chorale, which is a Santa Fe institution, and I'll let you describe a little bit about what that is. But you also started during NIA something called In Spirit, which is like a spiritual component. You're going to have to tell me what it is because we've never talked about it. I just know that it emerged during COVID as part of your dance practice or out of your dance practice, and you became an ordained minister.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's enough of me talking. I want to hear like a little bit with words what this is all about.
Well, if I start with In Spirit, it was, I was moved by moving. Movement is the way that I find a connection to something that is totally not without words, like you're speaking to. It's a connection to something that is... one might say all that is, one might say it's chi, one might say it's God, one might say it's just connection with others and the sky and the earth. But I found that the pathway for me was movement. And In Spirit the word In Spirit means to enliven and encourage. So my impetus for creating it was that I was finding my value. One of the things that I value most in my life is helping people find meaning through movement. And I don't have a particular, I'm an interfaith interspiritual minister. So I have no attachment or desire to proclaim what that is for anybody. But I do know that when I am in a space of bodies, coming together without words, with music, sometimes without music, that there's something that is touched in us and around us that changes the cellular makeup of a room, of our lives. And that feeling is something that I'm very interested in exploring. And it's that feeling is something I'm very interested in encouraging and enlivening in other people. I know I'm a teacher. Yes, I have been teaching Lili, but I feel like we have been co-creators. Yeah. I think that is where Nia itself is a movement art. I do believe that. And so we are creating movement art together every time we step into being in relationship on the dance floor. So it's absolutely along the lines of the art experience. For sure.
And one of the things that's so cool is that each class almost feels like a complete, to call it a work of art might seem like a little bit out there, but it feels like a complete expression of a number of people in whatever space we are coming together, and it is a co-creation. And you start each class with an intention. And every time you do that, it so nails exactly what's going on for me that it's uncanny. And I think it's true of everybody. But how do you determine what we're going to be, and say a little something right now as if we were starting a class, and then give us an example of how you start each class.
Well, in Nia, there's always, what makes Nia special is that there is a focus and intent. And that's very different from other fitness practices and anything that involves any kind of classroom movement activity. And the focus and intent is exactly that. We want to create, where are we going to put our attention and intention? And then how will we find that desired outcome for ourselves? And as I've taught longer and longer and been with movement longer and longer, I have really relied upon knowing, trusting that whatever I need as the co-creator, as the teacher or guide, I have faith that my bringing that forward will serve whoever shows up. And then there are times when, that focus and intent comes through in the moment of like, who's in the room? What music do I want to play with? I can choose something like my feet for a focus, or our feet, so that we feel grounded and relaxed. And we can also be a little more based in our mind, like we want to focus on imagination, or having different numbers that we play with, so we can really create mind health. So it all comes back to health and well-being. So there's the body well-being, there's health, there's emotional well-being, there's mind well-being, and then that little elusive thing that happens when we're together. So the focus and intent is a really significant uniqueness of the practice of Nia, but also of how we come together every day.
And what's amazing is that one of the things I was so allergic to, I've been dancing my whole life, and in the modern dance era, and when I was in school, the teacher would come and we were going to be blue or something today. And I hated that because I had no idea how to be blue. But something about the way you set the focus and the intention, it's never abstract. It's something that's always very, very concrete. And it's something that I've been able to really wrap my brain around. And I find it really valuable. And so you're also a singer. And so as we use our bodies as instruments in this way every day when we dance together, how is that the same or different from when you're
That's a great question. So the desert, it's similar in that in the desert chorale, there's the same sensation when we're in performance and even in rehearsal, where the expression is dependent on the person next to me, in that I'm in a choral environment. And even in when we come together in classes, maybe it's not dependent, but it is supported, supported by the person who is next to me or who is in community with me. So, and then when I'm singing, it's very much feels like very similar to dancing. Some of us are with rhythm more than we are with melody, and some of us are more in harmony than we are with rhythm. And there has to be elements that bring a cohesion to it. And in alignment with the classes that I guide, it's very unique. Each person's unique voice adds a different timbre, adds a different quality. So it would be a very boring experience if we all had the same voice. Right. In art, in any kind of art, if it was an art that was completely universal, there would be nothing interesting about it. So the magic happens when each individual uniqueness comes in, of timbre, of breath, of all of these things that make us who we are, but then finding a way to relate and also express together. And that's where singing and moving, at least in the classes that we've danced together, are very similar. I think many singers could benefit from more movement. And I think a lot of movers could benefit from more sound.
Well, you incorporate sound into the class. And but just to give our listeners just a little bit more context for Desert Chorale, because it's a very unique, well, to me, I haven't heard anything quite like it. You do everything from gospel to very high Renaissance chorale kind of music. How many are you in numbers?
We have 24 singers that gather twice a year, winter season and summer season.
And you do concerts twice a year here in Santa Fe. Do you also travel?
We have in the past. We've toured. We've recorded albums. It's a group of singers from all over the world, mostly from the United States. But singers from all over are contracted. They're giggers. And they are contracted for each season. And we come together for 3 or 4 weeks. And then everyone goes to their homes wherever they are.
And the director chooses the program.
He programs it, And then it's a nonprofit, so there's a board of directors and an artistic council, but mostly it's the direction of Josh Haberman, who really allows or guides the creative process.
And so, do you see a similarity between the way you conduct a class and he conducts the chorale?
I do.
I do, but
you
I'm
do? Oh, I want to
do.
hear about that. But yes. I do feel like a conductor. That's probably, and it's a word that I've used before in class. Like, how can we be an orchestra together? How can we be a choral? How can we have the orchestra of our bodies, which is comprised of so many different parts? So in our own essence, we are an orchestra. And then what's the orchestra of the group, or the chorus of the group, whatever it is we want to attach to. And I think the difference for me is that no matter what, like in a choral setting, it's not stagnant, but there isn't the energy isn't moving. Well, no, the energy is absolutely moving around the room. But as the conductor of a chorus or an orchestra, it's a dance, but the body stays in place. And with music or with dance and movement, I wouldn't feel. If I was to stay in one spot, that wouldn't feel as gratifying for me. So as a conductor, I'm constantly moving through the space in the movement circle anyway.
Yeah, there's so many layers of this going on. As you're talking, I'm really seeing it because, as you said, each of us have sort of a whole orchestra going on. And if you think of each of our the body parts as different instruments kind of conveying a harmony or a rhythm, so the feet doing the rhythm section and then the hands, and then each organized next to the other person that we're dancing with. So the way I see the similarity between the conductor of the Desert Chorale and you is that somehow, I mean, he's a little bit more in the space and you can see him, sort of cueing people to come up, but you in your way, even when you're moving through the crowd, you're pulling together elements of different people in the room. And I can always sort of feel you focusing on somebody over there and kind of bringing them in. And every once in a while, I mean, often my focus is just inside myself, doing my own private practice, so to speak. Yeah. But when I open my gaze into the mirror and sort of take in the collective movement of all of us, that's where I really see that there's something way bigger than me happening in the space and way bigger than just all of us dancing happening in the space. Yeah. And that's sort of hard to imagine for people listening, but unless you've engaged in an experience of people moving together as a group and in communion, it's really powerful.
It's very powerful, and I do believe it makes a difference. I mean, not only does it make a difference in your life, Lily, or, another student's life individually, I do believe that there is a collective of energy, which is where In Spirit also came together as a sensation of collective. Teachers from all backgrounds, all cultures that are online with me, but also mostly online, but it's a collective experience. And so even when I get so moved, I am moved every single day when I can look in a mirror and see each body creating a particular point of view and a particular, you could go to brushstrokes, you could go to photography, you could go to all these different art forms. Like each person they are moving art. And so, and I think that a class experience of movement creates even more possibility of each person being part of without having to change themselves. Just show up and move, and we are part of something that's intimate and bigger.
Yeah. So I'm curious, when you're in the front of the room and we each bring whatever we're bringing to the class that day, but I always feel like there's a moment where everybody just sort of surrenders and gives into this. Do you notice that from the front of the room?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And since we're all like our own separate instruments, it's really interesting to get out of your head and get out of your ego and get out of the space and just become danced by the energy that's in the room.
Yeah.
And that experience of total surrender is something that when I speak to painters, when I speak to people who practice different art forms, everybody seems to have that as a common denominator, this idea of kind of getting out of the way and just letting source, or whatever you might call it, come through. So say a little bit more about the In Spirit and the ordained ministry element.
Yeah. I first began to consider going to seminary after my dad died. And the reason, there are many reasons, but when my dad was dying, I had these experiences, because I was able to be with him when he died, and things that happened in a way that I could not ignore. And like every time a certain person would walk in the room, he would wake up, and it was always the same person. And but he was asleep to everyone else. But there was something like that was really inspiring to me, and also created a curiosity in me I was raised Catholic. I no longer practiced it. I still don't. I wouldn't call myself religious, but I was wanting to seek meaning, and I wanted to have the conversation with the awareness of different religions, different faiths, agnosticism, atheism was part of our conversation. So it really was truly coming from this inner spiritual place. And through my practice of Nia and through movement and feeling like those little intangible moments of, oh my gosh, source, whatever it is, I just felt more moved to have that conversation with different people. And then In Spirit was absolutely born from, I'm not here to proselytize to anybody at all, but I am curious about the rituals that we do, the way that we create meaning, and through those rituals, which I believe is movement, that is our ritual. That's my ritual. It's as much of a ritual as church was to me as I was growing up. And I wanted a space where I could explore how what I was already doing, the somatic offerings of what I was doing, was also, for lack of a better word, a ritual at church, a space of worship, of whatever it is that one can
sacred,
a sacred space.
Yeah.
And again, it's not about religion, but it is. And honestly, my sense as an artist is that I'm not really guiding people to anything except guiding them home to themselves. So our bodies are our homes. And so what I believe is that there's this inner wisdom that comes from finding that place. And that's where sacred is. So whatever that is for each individual, that's what makes it so inexpressibly wonderful. So it is really, it's not about the out when I really get into it. It's about the in, and then that goes out. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
And how do you select your music for the classes?
Some of it is routines that I have done, either through Nia, but lately I've been doing more and more of my own. I am inspired. Even today we had a beautiful class, and I'll find one song that I love, and I am inspired by that one song, and then I go down a rabbit hole of listening to songs that might go with it, and either they're I love the systems we have now with Spotify and Apple Music, where if you like this song, you might like this song. And so I can easily go into this exploration of artistry in these platforms. And then also really finding, doing my best to be diverse in my music offerings is important to me. So different kinds of music, different cultures. I do my best to be, recognize that. But really it's what moves me, like literally what moves me. And then also internally what moves me. Mm-hmm. And then that I trust it. I trust that it's going to move others. And sometimes the moving is actually discordant. So can bring a song in that feels dissonant and or challenging to ears. And that's also intentional. I have high intention when it comes to music that might not feel comfortable. Because that's what I believe the movement where the power comes is like working through discomforts and breaking habits and changing. And it never ends.
It never ends. It's so cool. I mean, what we did today, a lot of the movements that we were doing today were almost, I would say, counterintuitive to the music that was going with them. Mm-hmm. And I know that I'm learning and I know that I'm growing when we do something like that. And then when we were doing, you did sort of a tango routine the other day. Yeah. And it's just to be able to play with these different world music sort of cultures and to kind of go into it. And, and you really allow us to be so imaginative in that space. And so when you're driving down the road and you hear a song on the radio, all of a sudden does your body just start to move in different ways?
Absolutely. I'm constantly choreographing. Always.
And say a little bit more about, so Nia is a very specific type of choreography. When people ask me what it is, I do my best. But since I've never taken the Nia trainings, say a little bit more.
So Nia is a practice that is based on the body's way, how it's meant to move. And then we also have, it's just the systems of the body, the bones, the joints, our muscles, they're meant to move in a specific way. And it's the body's way. And then we also have the idea of your body's way. So even if for instance, my knee is meant to move in a certain way, but if I have an injury, my body's way, your body's way is that I need to change it. I need to make it possible for it to heal. So I may make different choices. So there's always the freedom of that. And then the choreography aspect of it, it's really about sensation. The steps are great. The moves are great. To find clicks to music is one of my greatest joys. But the truth is, my deepest truth is that that's a gateway to becoming what I said before, home with yourself. So the moves are simple sometimes, complicated sometimes, so that our brain stays healthy. But the goal is for humans to sense themselves. So it's about sensation. We talk about sensation a lot. Like, how do we feel? How do we sense our knee joints? How do we sense our neck? Where do we need self-healing? So the choreography is a big part of it, but it's not the end game.
Yeah, well, that's for me, that's what's kept me coming back over and over, because I grew up dancing and was exposed to a lot of choreography, but that became sort of it's a mental exercise as well as a physical exercise, because you're repeating the choreography, you're following the choreography. And there's something very, very satisfying about getting a dance so well that you can then finally dance it.
Yes.
But what I love about what you bring to Nia and what Nia has to offer is that the choreography is simple enough that you can really get to that place of forgetting the choreography and just dancing it. And then once you get beyond the dancing, it is just sort of feeling it in your bones and really moving with the music, which is I don't know that many people who don't have huge mastery in dance have ever been able to get to that place where, I mean, maybe it's like karaoke, I don't know, but it's kind of like you can just abandon all the self-consciousness and get into the sensation of it.
Absolutely.
And as I consider myself a dancer in recovery, because I have so many mental and physical issues that I developed along the wanting to be a dancer when I was a young girl.
Yeah.
That this has it's completely unlocked me. And how did you what brought you to Nia initially?
Well, I remember, I just want to say, do you mind if I share a little bit? Like, I remember dancing with you when you first started. And I could feel, and without talking, like you said at the beginning, we didn't have a conversation, but I could feel that there was some real, whether it be grief or trauma or whatever the words were, that you were healing through moving in a different way. And then later, when Lily and I got to know each other a little better, we did have the conversation of the healing from being a dancer. And that is, and also just the fact that we have these delineations of like, if you're a dancer, you're only a professional dancer, or you're only on stage, or you're this, or you're that. And what I've always held to is that everyone can dance. If you move, you dance. If you talk, you sing. And honestly, it's like, it's not even meant to be, you have to be walking around to dance. You have to have a voice to sing. There's an expressive part of ourselves that is always innate. And so my experience was that I was never the dancer in my family. My sister was the dancer. It didn't feel comfortable with my body type to even attempt to be a dancer. And then but I loved to dance. I loved to move. And Nia was kind of the way for me to come back to it and come back to the ownership of my being a dancer without it needing any kind of permission from anyone else or a specific art form of way of doing it, which I think are beautiful and I'm so inspired by. But I find that the more that I own that I can be a dancer without being professional, without being this or that, the more I can truly be myself. And I think every human has that in them.
Well, one of the things I appreciate so much about what you bring to our community as a Nia and in spirit provider is that, we live in a very artistic community and there are a lot of professional artists here of every genre. And, the expectation that you have to have a certain amount of proficiency in order to engage in that art form is, it's pretty high here in Santa Fe. I mean, you have to be a pretty decent artist to get into a gallery. You have to be a good singer to sing with Desert Chorale or the opera or any of the other performance-oriented art forms. But for us to be able to just walk in on any Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday at 9 o'clock in the morning and just let it rip without a studio, without all we have is this instrument that we walk in with, and to be able to engage in an art form that gives us access to that elusive thing that so many of the artists that I'm talking to in this podcast series and that I've been talking to ever since I arrived here. It's a really, really important thing. And I guess part of the reason that I wanted to have this conversation with you is I want people to feel the accessibility of dance, a dance class like this. Not all of them, unfortunately, Nia isn't in every city yet, but I wish it was. But I encourage people to look for movement, which is just fundamental to our culture. Is that? Oh, that's a cuckoo clock.
That's a cuckoo clock.
But that's what I think is just so extraordinary about the art form of dance. And I see a lot of dance performances in New York. I go to a lot of really high-end dance. And I now am able to watch it in a very different way because I've given myself permission to just move my body in a way that it needs to move on that day.
And that without perfectionism, that's a big one, I think, for many people, like learning it so that it's perfect. That isn't the goal. And I acknowledge too that there's the awareness around accessibility is very high, and it's really important. So, dancing in a chair is dancing, moving in a chair is moving, being on the earth is moving, so there's, and it is true, like within Spirit, our goal is to be able to serve as many, and it's what we're moving towards in the future, is what we really desire, is being able to offer classes that really do offer accessibility to many different kinds of bodies. And Nia does do that well. And of course, I think the wellness industry in general is really learning a lot right now. So the accessibility part that you're speaking to is really important. Not only in I can enter a classroom and I feel like I can be successful and follow along. The choreography is not so complicated that I can't. But then also, how do we up that ante and say, okay, but what else can we do so that people can feel what you feel? And movement is so important. You're right. I think Oprah I've heard her lately just being very vocal and extroverted about movement being so important, especially as we age, and to sustain our vitality, that's what it is for me, vitality, expansion.
Well, it's interesting because it really is at the intersection of wellness and spirit and art.
Yeah.
Which I think we're starting to understand more and more in our culture, that there is sort of an, what's the word, an inseparable connection between those three things. There's sort of three prongs of a chair. And, that no matter where you enter, which door you come into, you sort of enter into a space that it's completed by those three elements. So I think it's really appropriate that you're in the wellness. You've got one foot in wellness and one foot in the arts and one foot in spirit. So sort of the trifecta, the super trifecta.
I love it.
So where do you see going next with In Spirit or Nia or?
In Spirit, I want us to be, we actually just had a teacher meeting this morning, and we are really inspired to move towards being a nonprofit wellness offering, so that we truly can walk the talk of having accessible classes and partnering with different organizations that maybe aren't typically in the wellness world, but where we can bring wellness to, either online, because we have a big online platform, and then also in person here in Santa Fe. What I feel like I'm missing personally is that integration of, it's an interesting thing. When I was I'm originally from Fargo, North Dakota, and when I lived in Fargo, I felt like I was absolutely in the community. I was part of it. I was living it. It wasn't just, I went to work and I came home. And I found that during COVID, that I felt myself not really in that place here in Santa Fe, and wanting that to change. And I'm still in that place and hoping that I can somehow put together a nonprofit wellness center, or just offering classes where I am, but making it affordable and accessible. I am passionate about the meaning part of it, and about the enlivening, and making it as possible for as many people as possible.
Yeah. Well, did you find, speaking of the COVID, during the incarceration,
the separation,
in separation, did you find that it was palpably different to dance on Zoom, or did you have that sense of community? Because I can't say that I was at it because I didn't have a space big enough that I could even move my arms and legs.
I mean, it is different, but I mean, the thing that made it so amazing was that it meant so much. It meant so much to to those that we couldn't be in community together. So that feeling of it meaning so much, erased any of my frustration around it not being in person anymore. Because I could feel every single class how important it was that there was still a sustaining of community and also a movement together. And so that experience for me was, I mean, one of the most important experiences I've had. I didn't know it was possible that we could still feel like we were in community even though we weren't seeing each other. Of course, I think that ultimately, the seeing of each other physically is the medicine that I really love. But I still have online classes, and I feel very connected to my students online, since I realized, like, again, the access piece, there's so many people that don't have access to classes in period, whether it's Mia or movement or whatever. And so the online is the option. And that kind of brought that to the front for me of like, it's a real tool for connection for many people. So I would say they're different for me. I've chosen to mostly do online and in person, and they're separate. A lot of studios do hybrid, but for me, I enjoy more just like either being online or being with in person. And that really feels good to me. But they have a different sensation.
Interesting. When did Desert Chorale also do Zoom rehearsals?
Not Zoom rehearsals. When they couldn't do a concert, they did. We did some online. Everybody recorded their own voices, and then someone edited all together and did some sound engineering. And then they did some different, wherever some of our singers were. Like there was a quartet in New York that recorded something, and then that was presented to our audience, whoever it might be. And then coming back, honestly, from COVID into a choral experience was a trip, and it still is. It's a very vulnerable. Singing is, I would say, one of the more vulnerable places for any of that to arrive, as far as it goes into our respiratory, our throat, our things like that. So there was this. There's been a real journey of being comfortable again, even as singers together, and we're finally finding that groove. But yeah.
Well, because I remember during the lockdown, there were some of the most inspiring things that happened on Zoom were to see that little checkerboard of faces, not just in Desert Chorale, but artists from all over the world kind of getting together and sharing their voice with people in these incredibly, I don't know if they were mixed or they were spontaneous, but they were, just seeing people all over the world getting their voices together or playing instruments together across that sort of checkerboard.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Of faces was really, really.
We learned so much in weeks. I mean, the fact that, and it really was a real testament of like, we have to keep connecting, and that every part of the world in different industries and different art forms, they found their way to connect, and it was imperative and inspiring the way that it happened, honestly.
Yeah, I think we forget the degree to which we really all do need each other. I mean, we think that we're all so independent, but I think especially artists who perform their work together, I think they were the ones who made us realize how important that it was that we maintain our togetherness. And there are a lot of art forms that are solitary, but dance and song or and any music, I guess. Yeah. So do you play any instruments besides your voice?
I played the violin when I was a kid. So all through high school and even college, I was a violinist. My parents, I've heard so many stories about parents expecting their kids to be in sports, but that was not the case. It was expecting us to be in art. So they did not care. More music. My father was a professor, and he was a music professor. And we were taking piano lessons by the time we were 4 or 5 years old, and had to choose an instrument. It could be our voice. It could be anything. But we had to participate in that. Sports were a big part of our family, but that wasn't the expectation. The expectation was art and music.
So in your family, how many musicians are there?
Well, every single one of us had to do something. So there's 8 children. My sister Jennifer was an amazing flautist. My brother Michael was in bands, so he was more of like the rebel. And then I was really inspired by him. My sister Brenda was a professional singer and acoustic folk artist in Minneapolis for many years. Everyone has their own pathway. My dad was a philosopher and a philosophy professor, and aesthetics was one of his classes that he taught. So beauty was always in our conversations, even as kids, like how beauty was the pathway. And for him, art, music, beauty was the pathway to God. And he taught that. And so that obviously it just had such a big impact on my life. And, I don't know if I knew when I started teaching Nia, or that when I started teaching movement, that would be my pathway, that is beauty, and that would be my pathway. But I think all of my siblings have kept that in our core value of what does it mean to be meaning or be in meaning. And that was, art was always the pathway.
So say more about what you learned about aesthetics. Is a pretty broad term. Say more about aesthetics.
So aesthetics, he taught, he was a historian for the most part, but it was very specific because he taught at a seminary. So he was really exploring that the architecture, art of different eras, and where it connected to God. And he went through, he would start with, go into just like architecture, like the Ionic, the different kinds of, just elements of architecture, and talk about it, and also create a formula, or not a formula, but a conversation about what makes art good, is there such a thing as good art? Is there such a thing as bad art? What is it that we can hold on to, like, that brings us together in conversation of what good art, how does it make us feel? And so and that's just a huge conversation alone, whether something is good or not.
So is that like what happened around the dining room table?
I would say that he would teach, his students, and most of us as adults took his class, because we were so curious and wanted to learn from him. And then, or in like high school or college age, we all took as long as we could, and he was teaching. And then it was one of my dearest memories of my dad is that, we would sit at a table, and he had a slide projector, and it was, one of those old school slide projectors where every sound, and it became such a sound in our house. And before every class, every year, he would prepare. So we would sit and just watch all of this architecture, these paintings, these things go by. And it was part of kind of like our growing up. And it wasn't high. It was never from this place of elitism. It was just this thing that just happened in our family, in our house, to be exposed to it, to see beauty. And we, it was this music was always playing, and it was always in our lives. And the fact that I didn't think of myself as a dancer when I was little, I always thought that singing would be the pathway. I assumed. But then, life changes. And then movement became more and more important to me, and more of a vehicle. And I feel myself when I'm moving. It's really pretty spectacular. Like, I lose myself and I find myself at the same time. But yeah, it all comes from my dad and my mom.
Well, I certainly, one of the reasons that I love your class is that there is an aesthetic component to it. And the way you move is so appealing to my aesthetic. Oh. And your, aesthetic for music is so appealing to my aesthetic. Yeah. So it's sort of a love fest when it comes to that. But have you performed with your siblings or your family, and does that have a special quality to it?
Yeah, I have actually. When I was in high school, my older brother would always accompany me on.
Is that the one who's been in our dance class?
No, that's Mark. He's my youngest brother. Oh, okay. But he's actually a gallerist, and now is with a small gallery or museum in Minnesota, and he's really what my dad instilled in me was the same, and so he's bringing it into a different place.
But you were talking about your older brother.
So my older brother would come and play guitar for me, and then my sister and I would sing all the time together and harmonize and do all of these performances, and then we're not sitting around the piano. We were often not made fun of, but we're called the Von Trapps, but it wasn't that quite like that. It wasn't quite as innocent. But we definitely found time to sing, and my dad would often play piano and we would sing with him. And
did he have a good voice?
Yeah, he did. He did. My mom has a beautiful voice. Yeah, it's very, It's very
I can totally
genetic.
get the Von Trapp thing.
I know.
Actually, since you said that, one thing that we found that we had in common, I think that we discovered early on, was Edelweiss.
Yes.
And we both sang that song with our dads.
Yes,
and so that makes me cry even just talking about it.
I know. Yeah, it's
But,
really touching.
It's, and do you miss or your siblings are all mostly in Minnesota?
They're all in North Dakota, Minnesota. I have one sibling who's in Baltimore. And yeah, I do. I'm realizing as I get older that I don't have as an attachment to place as I thought I would. I mean, I live in Santa Fe. I love Santa Fe. I also see myself as pretty nomadic. So I kind of like wherever I am is where the meaning happens. I miss my family. Absolutely. I would love to see them more, but I see them, a couple times a year, and every time it fills me up. And they're all artistic in their different way. My sister is a yoga instructor now, or she has her own studio in Fargo, and it's all about meaning and it's about being, and yoga is part of that. So we actually both kind of took this path into movement more than in music. Well, music's still part of it, but yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So say a little bit, I've been asking everybody about Santa Fe because I'm sort of playing with this idea that Santa Fe is more than just a location. It's sort of a state of mind. Yeah. And so tell me about how you got to Santa Fe and what Santa Fe is for you.
Yeah. Santa Fe, I got here I had no intention of moving here or to the Southwest. I had finished graduate school. I was done. I have a degree in arts management, nonprofit arts management. And I was just applying for jobs, and I didn't know anything about Santa Fe. And then it was with the Santa Fe Chamber Music Festival, and I came here for an interview. They offered me the job very quickly. It was either the day that I interviewed or the day after. I found an apartment very fast that I stayed in for over a decade while I was here. Everything fell into place, even though I had no intention of coming here. But it was just like, okay. I'll follow. And then what I've received since I've been here is, I do feel, it is a wacky city. It is wacky in the most wonderful way. There's a lot of attention and, to art, obviously, but, I find it to be really inspirational in that there's so many different opinions out there too. So it's a place where seekers come to be, and where they find whatever they need through spirit, or through art or music, or just being in the mountains and being in our geography. But I also love the fact that there's such passion. I really feel passion in this city, and standing for, and voices being heard, and awareness that I don't really feel is there in a lot of cities. I just feel like it's kind of like this little strange mecca that doesn't exist anywhere else at all. And it's really filled me up with, it's filled me up with in a lot of ways, but I think the most is the people I've met that have really been open-minded and seeking. And I don't think that happens in every city.
So for your in-spirit practice, you've chosen people in different locales around the world even. Say a little bit about where they are and how you think that relates back to Santa Fe.
I think, my teachers, or the teachers, are in South Africa, Finland. In the States, we have teachers who are in Colorado, in California. I really feel that those that were called into in spirit, a teacher in Canada also, there's this thing I called the spirit nudge, and most of the teachers that I invited were completely from that place of a spirit nudge, and just feeling that they could be committed to what I'm committed to, which is courageous conversations, changing the wellness industry, and also offering movement for meaning and for health. And that collective of teachers that has come together has been incredibly important and kind of a home for me to be able to express and know that I can show up and be honest
and how did you meet these teachers?
Well, I haven't met some of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Some of them I've never met, but I know of them from just teaching. And I know when COVID happened, many of them started teaching online. And InSpirit didn't start it started like a year into the lockdown. So I had a chance to actually get to know some of these teachers just through teaching online.
Were they all NIA teachers? Is that it? Okay, so it was part of a NIA.
It was a NIA community, and now it's expanded into a teacher who teaches something completely different. My sister, she does yoga. So our hope is to expand it further and further, so it's not so NIA-centric, so that there's other different ways of attending. But yeah, just all over the place, and different cultures. That was important for InSpirit, so that it was
the diversity piece.
Diversity, so that bodies, that people can see themselves. I mean, which is what is so. I do believe is one of the most important things, is that the person that is in the front of the room, I can relate to them for whatever reason, but in the wellness industry, it hasn't been as. It's been very much like a stereotypical teacher looks like this, and InSpirit is really doing our best to represent many different possibilities body wise.
And do you have any men as well yet?
We have a man. We have a man. We have a man. His name is Paul, and he lives in California, and he's fantastic. And he's really a beautiful teacher, a beginning teacher. So we have all different levels of teaching too. So it's important for us to have, it's a development, and to support new teachers, to support teachers who are intermediate in that place of the middle, and then also high level and high skilled teachers, that they always feel like there's the collective is supporting each other.
And so how, in terms of their involvement with dance, I mean, because I've danced in a lot of different NIA classes, and there are different, even though there's this component of music, not everyone is as musical as you are, which is one of the reasons I really love dancing with you. Yeah. So how do you select your teachers? Are they all as aesthetically in sync with you?
I mean, I think the more important part for me is that, as far as being in sync, is that they are in sync with the values. And I honestly think that just as much as you relate to dancing with me in a specific, particular way, another teacher can be very different, but another person that enters the room would be like, that's what they relate to.
Right.
So I think it's... regardless of how I am, it's every single teacher has a way that, what vibrates and what brings people in. So there isn't an expectation that it feels like me. I actually don't want that. I want it to feel like we have a variety of because I know that there are students who don't want to dance with me. They prefer another teacher especially in our online classes. And I'm fine with that. I think it's fantastic. And I also think it encourages open-mindedness to have a roster of lots of different kinds of teaching, one that might be a little more mind-oriented rather than music-oriented. And it creates a possibility for us as humans to be open to that change or different kinds. And that also creates some pathways of meaning too. Yeah.
And so do you consider yourself in that three prongs that we talked about, sort of the artist, the healer, and the minister?
Yeah.
Which is your strong suit?
The strong? Oh my. I don't know if I haven't. It's so intermingled that, I mean, even those labels make me uncomfortable. So it's like, I was just talking about this with students, like the healer. I feel, again, it is, I am providing a space, but the healing happens it's the person that comes in that is the healer. I know that I provide space for it. Artist, I feel kind of the same way. It's like, I'm a guide, I'm in it, but it really is dependent on who's coming in with me. And the more that I teach, the more that's real. That it's the co-creation the co-creation is the art, and the healing is is a side effect of
The
co-creation. And then the ministering part is just embedded. So I feel that was another part that was coming through, and why I chose to go to seminary, is that I could feel that there was something happening in the way that I was sharing and verbalizing and saying things that really felt like a ministering in some way. And I think ministering is an active. Ministering is not, being, you can minister like being private, but mostly I feel like it's an action. Mm-hmm. So the ministering was also embedded in it. And so for me, there's no one without the other.
That's a perfect place to end it.
Oh, great.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. Please like and follow us on artstorming.org, where you'll find a list of our shows, a transcript of this episode with links to the guest page, as well as our other projects. ArtStorming is brought to you and supported by ArtBridge and listeners like you. Look for us on your favorite podcast platforms.